Strategy is essentially a recipe, right? So if you look at the companies across the world, every company tries to win the competition, right? But only a few of them succeed in doing so in a unique way. Let's take a simple example, McDonald's, right? McDonald's is essentially in a restaurant business, right? So it serves meals. Is it really the best burger you ever tried? I don't think so, right? I know 10 better places where you can eat better burger than at McDonald's, and you know as well. Does it serve any other meals? I don't know, like sushi, steaks? Not really. It's really focused, right? But yet, it's a very successful corporation, right? And it succeeds in beating the market. It succeeds in beating this with a very clear choices and a clear strategy, right? So a strategy to some extent is essentially a recipe, how you as a company are able to beat the market. Now this, this was probably just an analogy to understand this topic a bit better, but let's now get to some more specific themes for you to understand this better. And I prepared some even boring slides for you. So, what is essentially strategy? And let's start with answering this question from the other side. What is not a strategy? A strategy is, definitely not go to be the best. You often hear from the companies like, look, we want to be the company with the best distinctive product, right? We want to be a company with best clients, with best people, best services, other, right? Is BMW the best car? Well, probably not for everybody, at least not for me, right? Is McDonald's again the best restaurant? Not really. Again, there are many restaurants where you can eat better burgers, right? But yet those companies are very successful, and they are not trying to be the best, right? In the very broad range of this world. Is a strategy to satisfy all different client needs what's in the world, or all the needs of your key clients? No. If you look at, for example, Procter & Gamble, again, also very successful international company. Back in the history in 2000, I think it was around 2010 or 11, Procter & Gamble had actually a number of successful brands, right? Their brands was in food and beverages, right? It was, for example, Pringles, the chips. It was a Procter & Gamble brand. They had brands in pharmaceuticals. And of course, they have a large portfolio of brands in essentially what we call personal care and beauty, right? So Pampers, all the other stuff they are essentially producing and distributing. And yet they made a decision to divest profitable brands in food and pharmaceutical industry, right? Pringles is not anymore their brand, right? Why they made that decision? Because they decided that their strategy is to focus on their core client needs that they want to satisfy and on their core brands, as well as they made some decisions around core geographies they would like to push those core brands, right? So this is called focus, right? It's I do not know in my experience the cases where companies were trying to do everything for everybody and were successful. If you try to do everything good, most likely you will do nothing good, right? So this is at least my experience. Also, like one more maybe myth, myth about the strategy is that you want to be essentially the largest company on the market, right? Think about this. Let's take Ford, right? It's a large automotive company, and it's actually, I think it produces close to 4 million cars a year. Now, Ferrari produces probably 9 to 10,000 cars a year. Ford is worth close to 80 billion, Ferrari 70, very close. And Tesla, for example, that produces, I think, close to 0.5 million cars, is worth 1 trillion. So is really a strategy to become the largest company is the right one? I think it's not always the case. Now, once we learned what, some myth, what strategy is not, let's try to understand what is actually a strategy, right? So, there are, of course, different definitions. What is a strategy? But actually, I like this one the most, and it's closest to my heart, right? I'll just read it, and then we'll spend some time to explain. Strategy is an integrated set of hard-to-reverse choices to differentiate yourself in face of competition and to earn economic profit. Now, those simple words actually are really challenging to achieve and implement. First of all, let's take the first element, right? It's a set of hard-to-reverse choices. What is choice at all, right? In my experience, in my career, I had one project where we actually came as consultants to the owner and said, look, it looks like your company has 12 priorities, and it's probably a bit too much. And in a good strategy, you need to choose, you need to make choices. And he said, yeah, I made choice. I made choice to do it all. So this was his definition of choice, right? And, I think, difficulty of making the choices, that choices in the reality means that when you make them, you actually sacrifice something. You give something up. And what you give up might be actually a profitable and a lucrative segment of your business. As, for example, Procter & Gamble gave up, well, they sold, right? They sold Pringles, right? Still, they could have believed, we can grow this business and have much more value in 2020, maybe 2021. Right? That they made this choice, right? So, really hard to reverse choices are tough to make. And, if you think, so I just explained the word choices, I guess, but hard to reverse are actually the choices where if you make them, they really are challenging to undo. For example, if you think about the, like Ryanair, they made a choice to be a specific low-fare airlines. Their whole operating model, their flights, their planes, their personnel is actually used to this choice. And I think to actually change it and become a normal airline, it would take a very difficult investment, a very high investment if it would be possible at all. The same, for example, McDonald's. They choose to serve your food in 2 minutes and make it with a self-ready ingredients. That's a choice. And actually their whole design, even their kitchens, are designed in that way that enable the choice. And, if you would try to change McDonald's now to something else, you would probably need to invest billions of dollars, right, into this and not clear if successful. Now, the other important element is, I think is worth talking about is to differentiate yourself. So essentially, the differentiation. Of course, the purpose is really to have a distinctive features of your product, of your services, of your operating model that makes you win the competition. It's not to be the best company. It's really to be a company that is distinctive in a certain way among the competitors. Other, I think, important word here is actually a competition. So if you think about the history of the word strategy, it actually comes to us from military, right? It was essentially a certain direction the military generals would take to win the war against the enemy. Being it a, sometimes you can say it's a military war, later it was also military and non-military political war, but well, it was essentially about winning against the enemy. And in the business world, naturally the enemies are competitors, right? Translating to the realities of business world. So if you don't have a competition, right, as a company, and there are some cases like this, right? You are either in a very unique market, you are a monopoly, or you are, for example, the client demand is so high that actually clients are fighting for the providers of those products or services and not vice versa. The strategy actually might not be even needed, right? Because you might not necessarily need to have this competitive edge. But of course, in a normal environment where the company fights for the company, it's a critical thing to be differentiated versus competitors. And of course, the last one, to earn economic profit. Well, essentially, the definition of economic profit is a profit the company generates above the return on the capital, right? So, so the true profit, so to say. Naturally, if you don't want to make a true profit, so to make the profit to investors that are above their cost of capital, there is no sense to do business, right? You probably should go to charity or something like this, right? So this is essentially about what is a strategy in this definition. And if you think about the key questions that the strategy typically answers, right? They are the following. So the really very high level two ones are essentially where to play and how to win. This, as abstract and simple as it can get. And of course, within those questions are the high-level questions that you need to have in mind. Okay, where to play? You should be pretty clear about your core customer segments and markets you want to focus on, right? You need to be clear what is your differentiating value proposition. So what is the unique value you bring to the customer for the price he's paying to you? And of course, you need to have a tailored operating model. So the model, the way your organization is built in terms of boxes, organizational design, processes, etc., and activities to enable this winning value proposition. Now, so these are essentially, I guess, on some level of abstraction for you to understand what is really a strategy as such and what questions it answers. Now, if you look at at the typical, if you would do now a project on a strategy, right? There would be, a complex way how to essentially do it, a complex process, how to manage the stakeholders. It always, in my experience, a complex and really hard process that needs more an art than science, despite a number of frameworks that exist. But once that process is successful, what you will have as the output are the following things. You would certainly have the mission and values. They actually, they are rather, I would say, even the inputs to the strategy, right? Because they are seldomly changed. Usually it's like 1 in 10 years. It's essentially, a mission is a statement reflecting also together with purpose, reflecting why your company exists, right? So for example, Tesla would say, look, we exist because we want to accelerate the conversion to sustainable energy. Or Disney would say, look, we exist because we want to make people happy. They have a bit more complex formulations, but at the end it means this, right? We want to make people happy with our products, right? We bring happiness. So this is really abstract. And values are, you would say it's a key principles, but they are also abstract, right? If you look at the key principles, some of the professional organizations, professional services organizations, like client comes first, right? Maintain the independent perspective. Keep a high-level CEO view on things, right? It's actually, it's more guiding principles, but they do not answer the key question how you differentiate and win the competition. So in the process of once the process of development of the strategy is complete, you would typically have the following artifacts, right? You would have the vision, right? So essentially it's a statement of the aspirations and ambition of the company, how it moves towards this mission. So, some of this vision topics would be, look, we want to be a top quintile company, which could be, we want to be a leader in this industry, we want to be globalized, we want to be diversified. There would be a number of such aspirational and then more specific statements that indicates how you move towards this mission, right? And then they will be turned into a specific long-term goals, yeah. So which would be already very specific with time bound with the specific measures. And naturally, the next artifact that you will have is depending on how the company is structured, you will have either one corporate strategy or you would have some corporate guidelines and a number of business unit strategies that answers the question how you make your company differentiated. Because neither vision nor strategic goals answers that question. What is distinctive about your company, right? It's just a set of goals and things you need to achieve. But there is no answer yet there, those upper blocks of how you make yourself distinctive and differentiated. And then, what naturally this corporate and business unit strategies would also entail the part about specific initiatives and milestone and roadmap, how to get there on the different level of abstraction, right? So this is a typical output that you would get, from a normal strategy process. At the same time, the way how you get it is not sequential, right? It's not always sequential. There is always some circulation between, between vision and strategic goals, between strategic goals and strategies, between strategies. So, once you develop the strategies a bit better, that changes the goal structure, etc. So it's really about a bit of I would say art there, how you develop those things, and certainly it's not an easy, straightforward process, because at the end, as I said before, you need to make choices, ideally, in the strategy process, and to make choices, it's not easy. Not easy for anybody. True choices, it's hard to make. Good, so this is essentially, if you look simply about the artifacts. So let's move to the next part, what we have. Okay, this is actually, so why is a strategy important? This is like chart that I took from McKinsey website, right? From McKinsey article. What they show here, it's on the y-axis, you would see it's essentially the so-called economic profit. So what I was referring earlier, profit that company generate above the cost of capital. So, a true measure of its right profitability. And then on the x-axis, you would see it's essentially separate companies, right? So you would see that the majority, they did a sample of 2,400 companies, and the bottom quintile, so the bottom 20%, they generate actually negative. Then this middle, which is essentially 60%, they all generate an average economic profit of close to 50 million. And remember, those are mostly large companies. So this is really small with a very limited differentiation among themselves. And only if you look at this very right part, you would see that this top quintile, and even towards the end of the quintile, so really top 10% generate really abnormal profit. So this means that on this sample, Actually, and this abnormal profit is on average 1.5 billion. So it's, 30 times more than an average company generate. And this means actually that very few companies, so really like, I think here is the top 10%, manage to truly beat the competition. Why do they do this? How do they do this? Because of strategy? Look, certainly not only, right? Of course, the company's success depends on many other factors, such as culture, quality of talent and leadership, access to resources. So there are a number of things that makes, a success of company vital. But certainly, and the research actually shows this with the data, that, it tells that the company that with a clear strategy and understanding of the strategy among top management are likely to outperform the competition three times more often, right? So certainly strategy is a key part of this success, right? And actually, it's do all companies have strategy? Certainly not. Or as you've seen on this graph, actually many, I think, even of the large companies that have it in a formal way, probably it's simply not really good enough, right? I assume that there are some companies in this top quintile that might not have a very explicit strategy, but it's likely that they have it in an implicit way, right? So it's not necessarily a well-formalized document, but it's about, as I said, the choices that you made to differentiate yourself, right? So essentially, in this perspective, the strategy is the key to for the company to outperform the competition. Why is it important for you to understand the strategy as a project manager? So look, it's actually not that easy, right? Because the strategy development as such is really done mostly by the top management in cooperation with the board. It's usually how it works. The top management, so top 10, top 15 leaders develop the strategy, approve it with the board, and then it's communicated to the proper level, to the divisions that need to implement this. This is most typical strategy process. In my tenure with my previous employees, I even mostly did not know what was the company strategy because it was not required to communicate. For example, when I was a PM, I did not know what was the strategy for McKinsey, right? Because there was no decision to communicate to that level, right? Still, it's important for you to understand, and probably, when you speak to your clients, you will often have the situations where they might not know what is a company strategy, right? Because it's like a war plan to win the competition. It's not always public, but still, it's important to understand this from a multiple perspective. In your client work, is of course you need to understand the needs of your clients better, right? What they truly need to achieve, and actually make a decision for them to steer the project in the way it supports the strategy, if there are such decisions. Not all the projects have such decisions. There are many projects that that you would say it's more like operational improvement projects and needs to be done regardless of the strategy. But it still would be important add-on for you to understand the broader picture. And certainly, it's important for you to have this understanding from the perspective A. If my employer goes in certain direction, right, over the next 5 years, what do I need to change in my professional development to be really useful and to make a successful career here? And also, I think important element, for yourself, for making, for example, a strategy how to develop your own career or to develop yourself to a true leader, you need to have this strategic thinking and strategic DNA, or you need to develop this. And it's not that easy to develop, to be honest, because it takes a certain level of abstraction and conceptual thinking, but it's, I think, an important component of a leadership profile. Look, that's actually pretty much all the elements that I wanted to elaborate here in this presentation, and I'm open to your questions.
Thank you very much, Maksym. It's a great topic, and actually I believe that all our viewers got great insights today about the strategy, about what's important for them. And actually you so far are the most asked speaker so far. We have a number of questions. Again, dear viewers, just me remind you that the best question will get the prize. So let me start from this one. What is a hidden gem? The must-have secret of successful strategy. On the other hand, what is the worst example of strategy that you have ever seen?
Good question, right? Look, I think the hidden gem of the strategy, right, is a commitment and readiness of the leadership of the company, being essentially the management, the board, so really those who own the decision making about the strategy, to make bold moves. And it's very tough, I can tell you, because when you own the business or when you manage the business, and it's your money, it's your child, because you are a CEO or a CFO, whatever, in that company, it's really tough to make the choices, which particularly implies that sometimes you need to give something up. Imagine, I don't know, you have a company of 2,000 people, and one of the choices would be, for example, that we were pushing on some of my previous experience, to divest one of the businesses, right? To close it, just to, and you actually need to let people go. It's really tough decisions. And if you are, ready, if the stakeholders are ready for those decisions, that's actually, I think, the key component. So the key component of success of such strategy. Of course, it's not always, decisions do not always need to be so tough, but sometimes it's really challenging. One of the worst, I think, one of the worst examples I mentioned in my experience at the beginning, when we come to the shareholder, and he said, look, we said, well, there are 12 priorities. It's very challenging to do that. I said, no, we do it all. But we said, but look, it's resources, time. We haven't seen examples of this being successful. No, I don't care. We just will manage everything, right? And guess what? That company was average. They were essentially an average performing company, and of course with ambition to become top 5, and they remained average performing company. That's but you cannot change sometimes the opinion. So I guess these are the polar views, right, on this.
Okay, good. Thank you very much. Yeah, really great examples. So next question. What is the best strategy to grow in the market without or with a small number of competitors?
I think, as I said, if you don't really have the competition, I'm not sure you entirely need the strategy, because strategy primarily is about how you win in the competition. So if you are a single provider, you just need to make sure that you expand very quickly. So it's more about doing the same, just quicker, and probably better. But doing the same better, it's like operational efficiency. It's very important, by the way. Operational efficiency, it's a very important element of the success of the company. But when you don't have strong competition, it's not clear if you need really like a distinctive offering that somehow differentiate you from the competitors because they are not, or you know, the competitors not truly like competing for customers, rather customers competing for their providers, right? There are such situations. If there are few competitors, it's I don't think it's really depends on the number of competitors. It's more on the intensity of competition, right? The market shares that you have. There is this even famous indices, right, that reflects how concentrated the market is. But then you just need to find, you know, how you want to differentiate. And typically, you know, there are two large ways how you can be differentiated. You can be differentiated either as, for example, low-cost provider. So take, for example, Walmart, right? Walmart is essentially a low-cost provider, right? In the retail industry. Or, you know, you can be maybe like another example. You can be, I guess it's Xiaomi, right? The telephone providers who makes the iPhones, right? They're really low cost, actually, and they win on being the low cost provider, right? Or you can be an Apple, for example. An Apple is essentially differentiated by really making cool products for which they charge a huge premium. I guess, you know, at least I would say that Apple, the price of Apple is not probably is not fair from the manufacturing perspective, right? And compared to Xiaomi, it's like maybe, I don't know, 10 times more expensive. But they manage to charge the premium because their value proposition is differentiated and distinctive, right? So they win on the characteristics of their products they do. Right, so these are in large two key, essentially, strategies how you can differentiate. But at the end, you know, it's about finding a unique set of characteristics of your company, either in terms of the product or services you provide, or in terms of the segment of the customer segment you focus, or in the way you provide, so in the way you access those customer and deliver the service, right? You can be unique in that.
Okay, thank you very much. One more interesting question: what are the red flags that the company choose the wrong strategy?
Well, you know, there are, I think, few. First, there are, I guess, red flags at the level of the designing the strategy, committing to the strategy, and actually executing and seeing results. So they are like sequential, right? Mm-hmm. On the level of designing the strategy, I think the red flags you see when you will see at least the formulation of that strategy, right? If the strategy is not specific to you, is not specific enough and does not answer the questions around winning the competition, then probably it's at least, you could say it's not yet a red flag, right? But it's at least maybe a bit too generic, right? And then, of course, at the level of, because you know you design the strategy and then the management and the company needs to commit. So when the management, together with board, designed, the top leaders need to commit. They say, "Look, I commit to the strategy. I believe in it." Right. So when you have actually the challenges at the level of commitment, and your broad organization is not aligned, then probably you have already problems, right? Because maybe there is some misfit between, or the change is too large, you know, between the existing culture and the future one. But of course, the problem is, I guess, many of the red flags you see too late, right? Think about, you know, think about Nokia or think about BlackBerry. I don't know which of those you know, but Nokia used to be the largest phone provider in the world. Now it's nowhere. BlackBerry was also very successful provider of the, well, they were called Blackberries. I used them at my time and it was a very cool device. But, you know, they failed to recognize the trends and the competition and actually they went bankrupt. right? I think Nokia went bankrupt as well. I'm not sure, but I think at least they are nowhere in the phone business. And remember, this was for me, this was the first phone, right? Nokia, a great mobile phone, right? So the results of the bad strategy is and the red flag sometimes you see late, and the company is already gone, right? So that's a bit unfortunate.
Yeah, it's really valid point. And actually, you know, when you were talking about Apple, I actually was using Apple when Nokia was the cool phone, so I was like sort of a
You were the pioneer, right?
yeah, sort of, yeah. No one understood why don't I just buy Nokia if I can afford this, so why do I spend time with Apple?
You should have invested in stocks of Apple, I guess.
Yeah, okay. So maybe the last question, not to take a lot of your time. In your opinion, what is the best strategy for business development of a small product IT company?
Best strategy for business development of small product IT
company, yes.
Look, I think as essentially a startup, right? You need a strategy, right? But and a strategy which defines that you have a right product market fit, right? So essentially, you design a product that has a clear differentiation and demand from the customers, right? For that, what you would need to do is probably as a startup guy, right? You would need to define, okay, look, what is the key product I'm designing? What is my key customer segments? And what are actually the pain points I'm addressing for them, right? And how am I different in addressing those key points from the competitors? So once you know at least this concept, you relatively soon, of course, push the development. But my experience with the startups, the strategy, you really need to be agile, right? The strategy changes, like for you as a startup, you probably will change your strategy every, I would guess, 4 to 8 months, right? Because you will understand this, this basic things that I told, let's say, in a couple of weeks. You will push something to development. You develop a product. You will try to test it. Have the first reaction. You will understand that this is, it's stupid, right? It doesn't work. You need to change. So you will have this. As a startup, you will need to really to work in a really agile way in terms of customer experiences and testing, right? And you will need to be really agile with the strategy because it will take time for you to establish the right one and understand the right components. So probably, I would not overinvest. Typically for large company, strategy is a process that can take 6 to 9 months to develop. For a startup, I would probably invest, 2-3 weeks. Maybe 4 at most if you have time, and then just would run, test, see if this is successful, iterate as in a typical agile software development process, right? With proper customer experience, feedback, and so on. So it's you need to be really agile in this for a startup.
Okay, thank you very much. That's a great point. Thank you very much for joining us today. I really appreciate your time.
You're very welcome.
Your topic was amazing, and I hope that you enjoyed this conference, being a speaker. We hope to see you again in the future. So thank you very much.